Good evening, everyone. I trust you had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. Now this evening I have to start with an apology. The test was flawed, and I'm sure that some of you felt humiliated and crushed. And it all hangs around this one word, because after the meditation, it was Noreen pointed out to me that this word personality had never come up in previous talks, and I don't think it has at all. So I had to go back and review the situation. Now, it seems that the word used is sakayo, this body. And one translator actually translates it as embodiment. What does the word embodiment mean? Which I think is off piece, really. And another translation is identity. And in fact, Bhikkhu Bodhi, in a later translation of the connected discourses, actually translates it as identity, which is much closer. But having looked at it myself, my own personal word for it would be personhood, a feeling of being this person, right? Where does that come from? So that comes from this identity we have with the five khandhas, or to put it in modern language, identifying with this psychophysical organism, right? That's who I am. I am this person, and I include not only my personhood, my personality, but the whole thing, the body as well, you see. And the word personality, of course, is quite crimped. It's Oxford Dictionary says it's a combination of characteristics and qualities that form an individual's distinctive character. So he has an engaging personality, although he is a liar and a thief. I made that one up myself. So we'll just go very quickly through what we did yesterday so that you can see the correction. But I will start with Dhammadina's victory verse. So there's a whole collection of Therigatha, which are the verses that were left by the various nuns who became fully liberated. And this was her verse. One who is eager and determined would be filled with awareness, right? So if you're really eager, if we are really eager and determined to become liberated from suffering, then we'll really work on that sense of awareness. One whose mind is not tied up with sensual pleasure is said to be heading upstream. Now, in the myths that surrounds the Buddha's own process, remember, he put the bowl in the river and it went upstream, which means that everything we're doing spiritually is really against the flow of normal society, which is basically about getting excited, becoming a consumer, and enjoying the five sensual chords, as they're called. So that was her verse. One who is eager and determined would be filled with awareness. One whose mind is not tied up with sensual pleasure is said to be heading upstream. So that was obviously her path. That's what she's telling us. Made a great effort to be constantly aware and not to get caught up in indulging the sensual pleasures. Remember, she came from a rich family there. Visakha had been, I think, yes, he was a trader, a businessman, and he had listened to the Buddha's words and become a non-returner, which is pretty high up the steps of spiritual practice. And then he wasn't interested in being a householder anymore. He slept in a different room, which upset Pisaka. And finally, it's upset Damadina. And finally, Damadina thought, well, I may as well become a nun. So she went to become a nun. And she, of course, attained full liberation. So here we have a very strange situation for those times. Here is a husband who is asking his wife to guide him. I mean, it's unheard of in those times, remember, yeah? So and of course, she is named by the Buddha as the foremost in preaching or teaching. So the first question was identity or personhood. Personhood, what does the Buddha call that? You see, the Blessed One, he said, well, it's clinging. It is this identity with the five aggregates, our bodies, our feelings, perceptions, concepts, all our habits and consciousness. And then he asked the question, what's the origin of this? What's the cause? Again, he's put the origin, but it's the cause of it. The cause is this tanha, this wrong desire of seeking happiness, real happiness in the sensual world. And the cessation of this personhood or self, see, that's another word we could have used, self, but sakaya kaya is the psychological self. It's a way of referring to it, but it also includes the body. So it has a bigger sort of meaning, you might say. And it's actually used when somebody has that first insight into stream entry. That's the view that goes. It's the view of self, that view of being a self that disappears, but not the sense of self. Still, that feeling remains of being this human being. And that doesn't go until we're fully liberated. So what is the cessation? Well, it's the remainderless fading away, giving up, relinquishing, letting go, and rejecting that same craving. Now, remember, there are 16 personality views, 20, excuse me, can't count, 20 personality views based on the 5 aggregates and the 4 ways of relating to them. So the first one was, of course, to regard the body as self, feelings as self, etc., etc. So that was a pure identity. The next one was to sort of possess it. I have a bad knee, and so forth. The next one is to feel bigger than the body. The self feels bigger than the psychophysical organism. As when you feel really fit, you feel good, you feel happy, and you take your body for a walk, and you feel that, you know, that sense of me is bigger than this body. On the other hand, the opposite is true when you feel possessed or trapped in the body, especially when it's ill or not feeling well. So those are your 4 different types of identity. And when you multiply that by the 5 aggregates, then you have 20 types of identity. And of course, the question arises from that. How does this personhood view or self-view or identity view not come to be? How does it stop? Well, it's by perceiving the delusive nature of that and perceiving that these 4 modes of identity are just notions in the mind. They're just something that we make up. That comes from, if we go back a step, that comes from the delusion that lies within the awareness itself, the intuitive awareness, right? Remember, it finds itself within these 5 khandhas and presumes itself to be that. And in our meditation, when we pull back within ourselves to find that observation post, and we're looking at these 5 khandhas, these 5 heaps, right? We're looking at the psychophysical organism. That separation is telling us something about the relationship of awareness with this organism, right? It's beginning to feel that it doesn't have that identity. The identity begins to be undermined. Okay. I mean, that's the core purpose of our vipassana. And then we went on to the Eightfold Path, which is a simple question. What is the Eightfold Path? We know that off by heart, of course. And the three aggregates are now, here again, the use of the word, the three aggregates included in the Noble Eightfold Path. This is the way that the Noble Eightfold Path is split: Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. So Sila is our ethical conduct, Samadhi, our meditation, and Panya, our wisdom. And so the way it's put here is right effort, three aggregates are not included in the Noble Eightfold Path, but the Noble Eightfold Path is included in the three aggregates. So in other words, the Noble Eightfold Path is made up of these these 8 factors, it translates as aggregate. What would you say? 3 sections. Right speech, right action, and right livelihood. These are the aggregates of virtue, okay, ethics. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration are the aggregates of concentration, or wider still, it's meditation. Yeah? And right view and right intention, these states are included in the aggregate of wisdom. Okay. Even though we say right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration is the aggregate of concentration, if you think of that also in daily life, just washing the pots, being aware, putting your attention there. So it's not just the meditation. Yeah. Okay. So then we can move on a little. So concentration now. See, what is concentration? What is the basis of concentration? What is the equipment of concentration? What is the development of concentration? So this is put in such a sort of quizzical way that I would never put it to you as a test. It would be crushing and humiliating, because you've got to sort of get into the way, the speak, the sort of scriptural speak, how things are put. So concentration, the word here is ekagata, which means everything going one way, one way. So the mind, the attention is just going one way. Here the word that Bhikkhu Bodhi has chosen is unification of the mind. I would prefer attention, unification of attention. The fourth, the basis of this concentration are the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Now remember that the 4 foundations of mindfulness on the body, on feelings, mental states, and on all the teaching of the Buddha, the hindrances, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the Eightfold Noble Path, etc. Those 4 foundations not only are for the meditation, but in ordinary daily life. So the basis for this concentration is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. What is the equipment? In other words, what you use in order to get this right concentration? The 4 kinds of right effort or striving is put here, the padana. So remember, that is, if I get confused with this now, if an unwholesome habit arises, we then just get onto it ASAP and not get involved in it, and we stop further arisings of these unwholesome states. When a wholesome state arises, we develop it and we try to maintain it. Those are your 4 great strivings. Now, what is the development of concentration? Repetition, development and cultivation of these same states. So it's repetition. When you're on retreat, the whole day is the same. The schedule is the same. You get to use the same noting words because you're always doing the same thing. You're always eating at the same time, sleeping at the same. Everything is, and this repetition, it comes with a wisdom to it, because there you see how the mind always wants to enjoy itself. It always wants to indulge itself, wants to do something else. Yeah, and repetition is just a way of calming the whole process. So repetition in concentration as such, that's why we watch the breath. If you said to somebody, any person in the street, I watch the breath for an hour, they'd say, well, you must be nuts. I mean, what would you do that for? It's completely boring. But for the meditator, this is how we get this unification of the mind, you see, this unification of attention. And of course, there comes with it the peacefulness and that sense of inner joy. So that's your right concentration. I think we've got time for one more. Lady, how many formations are there? Now, again, these formations, it's sankhara. The word is sankhara. We've come across this word before. It's your volitional formations. It's your habits. What type of habits are there? What type of how does the will express itself? So there are three of these: the bodily formation, verbal formation, and the mental formation. But lady, what is the bodily formation? What is the verbal formation? And what is the mental formation? Volitional formation, habits. In breathing and out breathing, friend Visakha, are the bodily formation. Applied thoughts and sustained thoughts are the verbal formation. Perception and feeling are the mental formation. Now, but why are in breathing and out breathing the bodily formation? Why are applied thought and sustained thought the verbal formation, right? So if thinking, why are perception and feeling the mental formation? Friend Visakha, in breathing and out breathing are bodily. These are states bound up with the body. Okay, so any action which includes the body, such as me waving about like this, those are bodily formations. And that's why it's called a bodily formation. Now, first one applies thought and sustains thought, and subsequently one breaks out in speech. That is why applied thought and sustained thought are a verbal formation. Now, the reason why this is interesting is because often the second step of the Eightfold Path, well, it's called Samasankappa, right? So it's right view, right. Now, it's translated often as intention, or my own preference is attitude, but occasionally you'll get people saying it's, translation saying it's thought, right? But thought, of course, is simply inner speech, your mental speech. And it rightly comes, as Dhammadina points out to us, as part of the verbal actions. So that right attitude or right intention is something which sits within us as a way of expressing wisdom into the world, right? That's why it's put as these. It's normally the examples that they give is from selfishness to generosity, or through renunciation to generosity, from hatred to love, and from cruelty to compassion. So these are attitudes, yeah. So, oh yes, so I think we can leave it there for this evening. These are a wonderful series of little answers and questions, and it'll keep us on our toes. Very good. So I hope you've forgiven me for my terrible test yesterday, flawed as it was, and that you will take inspiration from Dhammadina and continue until you become fully liberated sooner rather than later.